Welcome to the Being Known podcast with my friend, Dr. Kurt Thompson.
My friend, Pepper Sweeney.
We are here to discover and explore what it means to be truly known. Hey, Kurt.
Hey, Pep. Good to be with you again.
Always.
Yeah.
Always. Excited about today. I love when you start talking about trains. We're going to be discussing trains today and tracks and all the things. We are talking about, the episode is called It's Time for Beauty. And we are talking about time travel today.
Yeah. For our listeners, we've been following the outline of the 8 primary domains of integration as a framework for how we're talking about beauty and our encounter with it. And today we're talking about the temporal domain, this notion that we as human beings we experience time in ways that, as far as we know, no other creature does. And there's a lot we could say about that, but one of the ways that we can talk about time and we experience it is that we can travel on one of 2 different tracks. We've covered this in other episodes, but one track, track 1, is a track that we are on most frequently, and it doesn't. There are good purposes that track 1 serves. It's a matter of how we imagine the past and imagine the future, and there are certain things that happen when we're on this track. We spend most of our time on this track. We typically don't. We're not conscious that we're on the track. We tend to remember things on this track really pretty automatically, and we tend to anticipate things when we're on this track pretty automatically. But one of the features of being on this track is that we don't typically have to, it's effortless for us to get on this track. It's very easy for me. The second thing, it's easy for me to be on the train that's riding on this track without any help from anybody else. I can do this all by myself. And the feature of this, the way my mind tends to travel across time when I imagine the past or am anticipating the future, is that when I imagine the past, it's typically an imagined past of regret. The things I'm sorry for, the things I wish I'd done differently, the things that give me anguish or sadness or grief or anger. I imagine something in the past that is really is circling around this word regret in some way, shape, or form. And if I then zoom past my present moment and I go into the future, I'm often anticipating a future with anxiety. And this notion that we tend to remember our future means that the experiences that I'm having from my past are fueling the future that I'm anticipating. And if most of my past has been one of regret, it will only have me anticipating one that I likely will experience in which I likely experience the same thing in the future. So I worry into the future. And another element of this track 1 is that it is influenced deeply by the experience of shame. Both when I imagine the regret of the past or the anxiety of the future, because it is really wrapped around my sense that I am inadequate. I was inadequate to whatever it was that happened in the past, and I am and will be inadequate into the future. We spend a lot of time on that track. And we have an option to actually travel on a different track, the second track. And this is a track that requires more conscious intentionality. I have to buy a ticket. I don't have to buy a ticket for track 1. I'm just on it.
Yeah.
Track 2, I have to buy a ticket, and I have to buy a ticket with someone else. To be on track 2 often requires the participation of other people with me. And instead of being shaming, mostly on track 2, I am being curious. I'm not being condemning. I'm being curious. So I'm conscious, I'm on purpose. I'm doing this on purpose. I'm doing it with the presence of other people, this interpersonal nature of this to help me get on this. And when I think about my past, When I'm on track 2, I am thinking about it. I'm reflective. I'm reflecting on my past. I want to be curious about it in order for me to have some sense of what can I learn from this? Not what was wrong with me, but perhaps what happened to me, what happened to somebody else when in their past. I can be curious about my past. How would I do things differently, but without condemnation, but rather out of curiosity?
Mm.
And when I move into my future, it's a future in which I am planning for things. I'm not anticipating the future with anxiety. I am planning. Here's what I want to do. This is the action that I want to take. So often, when we are imagining our future and we are anxiety provoked, we jump over lots and lots and lots of moments and we jump to a catastrophic endpoint somewhere out in the future in which I'm worried about worst case scenarios. And I'm doing that because I'm not actually taking into consideration all those moments between right now and that imagined future in which I could take action and plan for whatever those actions are going to be. But if we're on track 2 and enabled to be there because somebody else is buying a ticket with us and they are asking us questions of curiosity, inviting us into this space, I can be more communally connected to that second track. And the primary imagined future is one of hope. We think about Jesus in the Gospel of John when he is saying to his disciples, in this world you will have tribulation. And then he says, but be of good cheer. Take courage. Have hope because you're trusting me. You're not trusting your future. You're trusting me is what we're trusting. And one of the things that we see about beauty is that beauty draws us to track 2. Remember that if we're on track 1, I'm there automatically. My mind seems to be running its own train. I don't seem to have much agency in deciding where I'm going to be. I'm just on the train.
I would say, we talked in the last episode, you talked about how we pause for beauty.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think that if you're going to get on this other train, I mean, because the first train you're just on, right?
Mm,
So if
mm,
you're going to consciously get on this other train, you have to pause
mm, mm,
before you get on that train.
mm,
And and uh and I'll say that my experience through this season has been that my pauses with beauty have um have allowed me the space
mm.
to get on train 2.
Can you give an example of that?
Well, we talked a few weeks ago, for instance, I was having some uh there were some things going on that were bringing up things in my past that were bringing up
Mm-hmm.
things of,
Mm-hmm.
and I was looking at them with regret and looking at them,
Mm-hmm.
in those terms.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
as I was um, paying more attention to beauty, uh,
Mm-hmm.
it gave me the space, and I would dare to say that um, there were deeper connections with God that were happening there,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm.
um, I was um, I was able to see things in a different way
Mm-hmm.
and discover a way to start looking back and reflect on what was happening. And but I also, there was this process of, while this was happening, I was coming to you, I was coming to Amy, I was coming to Nell, and I was discussing these things and these things that I
Mm-hmm.
was feeling,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
so that you all helped me to get on
Mm-hmm.
this other track and to start
Mm-hmm.
being more curious,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, and being more reflective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it was beauty that allowed me the space to do it, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mentioned in our last episode when we recorded, it happened to be I had just come off this 2.5 day intensive that our practice was running last week, and one of the offerings that we provided, one of our clinicians, Stephanie Christensen, um, uh, in a earlier in her life, she was a musician and a vocalist and just really talented. I can't believe that we get to work with her now. And she led this cohort in an exercise that invited them to listen to different pieces of music and invited them to allow the music to evoke things within them that they could then reflect on and pay attention to. And it was an exercise that invited and required the members of the cohort to just be present.
Yeah.
They weren't taking notes. They're not listening to somebody talk to them. They're being present to the piece of music. And she offered different kinds of music that evoked different things that they were sensing in their physicality. And it was one of these moments where it brought people into a space where they were choosing to be in a space, or not just automatically on track one, running up and down and so forth. So that even when the music was evoking a certain sense of tension or a certain sense of anxiety or, distress, they were with the distress. They were able to see that they were experiencing it, but it didn't consume them. It wasn't, because they were doing it together with others. It was this intentionality that you're talking about that gives us pause and lets us be open to things in our story that it's really difficult for us to be open to when we are running on track one. So beauty I love that. I love that story for you of how things become generative and new as we are willing to put ourselves in the path of oncoming beauty and allow it to bring us onto track two. And one of the ways that it brings us onto track two, it slows our pace, as you've already mentioned. And when our pace is slowed, our attention to beauty is made possible in ways that I, don't typically pay attention to it. We've said here before that we actually, functionally, we treat beauty as, it's a luxury. It's something. It's an accessory. It's something that we add, but it's not basic. It's not fundamental. Unless we were to consider the possibility of what would happen if all beauty in the world was just taken out, and we would discover that we would be left with virtually nothing in the world. Because there's just so much of it around us, but we are so busy running on track one, we don't see it. And by being present with it, it reduces our anxiety because we are brought into the present moment. With enough practice of this, it extends our capacity to notice beauty where before we did not notice it. And when we practice creating opportunity for us to experience less anxiety because we are choosing to do so, as opposed to, I just hope I hope I'm less anxious. One of the things that when I'm working with patients, when we are using, pharmacotherapy, when we are using medication as an intervention for things, which is oftentimes necessary, because for all of the interventions that we can provide for people to do on their own, sometimes their brain has so overshot the threshold of anxiety that they need some extra assistance in the beginning to get that regulatory process of anxiety initiated, and can be really effective with this. And then they will reach a point where, when their anxiety is regulated more effectively, and then they're able to start to do some of these exercises and work and start. But there comes a point where we're going to see, what is it like for you to begin to back off on the medication and see what happens? And there's a certain sense of like, am I going to have agency? Or am I going to have to have something from the outside, or am I going to have agency? And so one of the things that these kinds of practices of slowing down does, it really gives us an embodied experience of agency, such that I have the sense that there are things that I can do to reduce my anxiety. And just to be clear, this does not mean that, there are some people whose anxiety, their set point in their brain, their threshold of anxiety is such that they might be on medicine for the rest of their life. And the question is always not, well, are you either on or off medicine, as if one is better than the other? The real question is always, am I living my life in a way of wholeness, or am I not able to do that? And if medication enables me to be whole, enables me to be integrated, just like wearing a pair of shoes typically helps me have a better day.
Right.
In that sense, it enables us to function well. But practicing being with beauty extends our capacity to notice it where we didn't before. And then eventually we begin to practice noticing beauty in the very context of grief. When we go to the museum, as we were talking about last week, when you go to the Getty and you're with the irises, we would anticipate that we are going and we anticipate not being disturbed. We anticipate being able to be present with the irises, and we're going to sit with that for 30 minutes or maybe longer. Practicing doing that increases and expands my capacity to then actually bear witness to beauty in places where it is not so sanguine, where it is not so easy. We get closer and closer to the echoes of, Vedran Smilovic, the cellist of Sarajevo, where beauty is taking place in the middle of carnage. But if we don't have any experience with beauty in the first place, it becomes difficult for us to just hope we find it in the middle of really hard places, which is why practicing doing this is so important. One example that we have from the biblical narrative is this notion of experiencing beauty in the middle of grief. We see in Jesus' encounter with himself in Gethsemane the sense that, he's got this 3-step process in his prayer, but Father, take this cup from me. This is a request, but I am anguish. My soul is in anguish. He says this. He's naming what he feels. And then he asks for something. Take the cup. And then he submits to God's will. And we so often skip the first 2 steps, thinking that, we're just going to submit to God's will. And in a way, beauty imagines us, because, if you say like, I remember when I went to see Mark Rothko for the first time in the National Gallery in the East Wing, in the East Room here in Washington, and my friend and I, when we sat with the Rothko paintings, most of the people who came in and out, they were in and out in 5 or 10 minutes. And even being a complete novice at the time that I was, I'm like, I'm even aware that like 5 minutes with this painting is gonna do. I need not even have come. But something like Rothko asks us to sit and wait. The irises, you can walk in and look at it and say, that's beautiful, and move on, which tells us something more about us than it does about the painting. But if you sit with the irises long enough, things start to happen, as I'm sure you've experienced.
Yeah, what this makes me think, Kurt, is this idea of being present with beauty, this idea of track 1 and track 2. You often say that the brain can't be anxious and grateful at the same time.
It can't be anxious. Anxious and grateful. Yeah.
Yes,
in the present moment. Yeah.
Yes, in the present moment. I'm wondering if we can truly be present in the midst of anxiety.
Well, it's a tricky thing. When we are anxious, when we are flooded, it takes a great deal of work. I mean, how many of us? I remember I was a sophomore, I think, in college, and I'm sitting in a chemistry. I have a chemistry exam, and I sit down to the exam, and dude, I'm telling you, like nothing on the exam page, like I didn't recognize it. Like nothing was
Right.
making sense.
Right.
And it was the first time I ever had a panic event.
Hmm.
And I couldn't get that thing stopped. And I didn't know it was a panic event at the time. And I was so overwhelmed that there would have been no amount of mindfulness practice that I could have called upon in that moment to have stopped that from happening. I'd never had it happen before. Didn't know that that's what it was. And so, for our listeners, like, yeah, there are plenty of times when we get overwhelmed with anxiety, and as much as we want to be able to be in the present moment and take 2 or 3 deep breaths and kind of find our feet solid on the ground and so forth, and yeah, Pepper and Kurt will be so proud of me when I tell them like what I was able to do. Like, there are just times when it's overwhelming, and you get a sense of this with Jesus, even in Gethsemane, right? He says, I am anguish. I'm in anguish here."
Hmm.
And this is where I think the whole question of the degree to which we find ourselves alone with our anxiety that is so crucial.
Right. Right.
And to the degree that we have connection with others with whom we can say, I'm over my head with anxiety, and they are able to empathically connect with us, that becomes a way in which our anxiety can be reduced and I can be brought back to the present moment.
I think about times when I've been on stage in a
Oh,
play
oh my
and
gosh.
the brain stops
Oh my gosh.
and you're
I can't even.
the panic, you talk about not being able to be in the present moment until another actor sees what's happening. Oh my gosh, I was just doing a play once and there was a guy who he just went vacant. And we were at a point in the play where the next 2 pages were all his dialogue and it was all new material. So there wasn't like I could say, trying to find a way to get us back on track because my character wasn't supposed to know any of this
The
stuff
things
yet,
that he's
the
about to
things
tell
he's
you.
about ready to say. So I couldn't just, cue him to go on, but just like,
And
you
you saw
know,
wait. So the moment happened, and at some point, whether it was like a nanosecond or 2 seconds or what, at some point, like it became clear to you that he was like he'd
oh,
left the building.
no, he was gone. He was completely gone to the point that I know in his mind, he's thinking, I have to walk to the edge of the stage and say, I'm sorry, but we need to go back because I don't
And this is
know.
live audience.
This is a live audience. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Oh my
And
gosh.
um, just to be able to like connect with him visually and, you know, breathe. And it probably, it felt like an eternity, right? It felt
Dude.
like,
Oh.
especially, and I know what, like, because that feeling that I've had, it's like the room just kind of goes, like it just get you like it's just this,
Oh, oh my
right?
gosh.
And you're just like,
It's eternity
you
of the
know,
wrong kind.
it is. It feels like it,
We're
but
like hell.
until you can get the help from somebody else to bring you back to the present
Mm-hmm.
moment, so you
Mm-hmm.
can breathe through some of the panic and anxiety that you're feeling,
Yeah.
you can't go
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what do you remember happened?
Well, I mean, he danced around and then the problem with this one was he would get back on it, and then he was gone again. I mean, it wasn't our best show. I'll say that. He finally got back on track, skipped half the material, and we kind of figured it out along the way. But yeah,
Mm, mm, mm.
yeah.
I remember the first and only time I went scuba diving,
Uh-huh.
and a friend of mine and I had, we were, this was in the Caymans, and we were like, neither of us had ever done it before. And so we're in the pool in the morning getting trained. And then we went out, off of a dock at shore, but the dock that was in 40 feet of water. And we're gonna dive down to 40 feet, which for newbies, like That's not a
Yeah.
that's deep. That's deep.
Yep.
And and I'm like, I'd had a great experience with the dive master. She was great, teaching us and so forth. And so I come off the ladder and I start to go down. And I mean, dude, I am under the water less than 1.5 seconds, and I start to panic the second time in my life.
Right.
And I tell you, it's better to have a panic attack sitting in chemistry class than it is to have a panic attack with scuba gear on and you're going under the water and you're belted with weights that are taking you 40 feet down, right? This is not good news.
Not good. No.
But here's what she did. She could see the panic, and she just put her thumbs up, like we're going back up to the surface, and going back up literally 12 inches, right? Going back up to the surface, because that's about how far it took for me to panic.
Right.
And she took her regulator out and she said, "How are you doing? Just breathe." There was no sign of panic for her.
Mm-hmm.
Just like with you, the actor, you're trying to find, you're just going to be a presence.
Right. Exactly.
And she said, "We're going to take our time. Let's try it again. We're just going to take our time." And my awareness of her care for me, that was the game changer.
Yeah.
And it required work on my part, because first I now, because the temptation is is it going to happen again? Am I going to? Mm-hmm. And so there's work to do on my part. It's not just all her, but that awareness of another person, right? It took that moment of eternal hell, of the panic, and transformed it into a different kind of time travel, such that when I went down the second time with an intention and awareness of what I needed to do, and she's not very far away, it enabled me to do the work that eventually became this amazing, 30-minute dive. And it was just remarkable, and a remarkable experience of knowing how beauty emerges as a result of other people coming for you in that way, and how it helps us with our temporal, this whole notion of time, us getting stuck on one track or the other, right? And in this case, it's a panic track. It's not just anxiety. It's full on panic. And so, I think the other thing too that we see is that this kind of thing, it enables me to imagine a future in which if I get in trouble, I'll be okay because she's here.
Right.
I don't imagine a future in which if I'm in trouble, I'm really in trouble because I'm by myself. Oh, we'll be okay. And this is the essence of how our traumas are healed. Because we begin to imagine, so even in me, the dive master was not overwhelmed. She was not living with the experience that I had to get out of the water. She could see something beyond the anxiety that I could see. But I couldn't manage it on my own. She could see something that I wasn't able to see.
Yeah.
And this is how our traumas are healed. Again, referencing that intensive that we were part of last week. The number of times that I witnessed moments in a room of people who, prior to Wednesday afternoon, had never met each other, watching these moments emerge where in the middle of people's stories of often great brutality, watching hope physically emerge right before my very eyes. In their gaze, in the shift in their body posture, the tears that would start to come because they finally could. Tears that were coming, tears of great sadness, of great grief, that eventually would become tears of joy and incredulity that I could be loved by people who have no idea who I am. And who I was sure 30 minutes ago, once they knew who I was, would want nothing more to do with me. Just an amazing thing.
Mm.
And all of this, this changes. Like this changes. So one of the striking things that these moments of beauty did was that it changed the capacity of those who were healed to envision their own story differently. Like literally 30 minutes before these things, these interchanges, they did not have the capacity to envision that healing was a possibility for them. They couldn't see it. They couldn't see the beauty until they actually had an experience, an encounter with someone who could see the beauty for them, giving the opportunity for their imagination to catch up and to enter into that experience. And so it doesn't just make me able to see, it also makes it possible for me to imagine all kinds of things that I can see in other people that heretofore I couldn't see. And so beauty begets beauty in this way because it's strengthening our capacity to steward that which we've been given to rule. Just reading a number of authors and theologians recently, this whole notion of, Paul's language that's very explicit. And when you read it, you're like, really? When he says, you who will be expected to rule, Paul and John, rule over angels. You read that, you blow right past it because you're like, I don't know what universe that's being talked about, but it's not the one I live in. And if that's going to be our role, if it's going to be our role to rule in a world of beauty that is so bright and so solid that it would necessarily overwhelm us, given our current status and our difficulty being with beauty, that's something to say that that's a big deal.
That is a big deal. That is a big deal. One of the ways that personally I experience beauty on pretty much the regular is through nature. Mm-hmm. And we have asked you all to spend some time pausing and noticing and paying attention to the beauty of nature in this past week. For me, one of the things that there were so many, it's so interesting because I can just look back at my photo library on my phone, because anytime I see beauty, I'm snapping a picture. And one of the things that I experienced this week was I was on a pre-dawn flight, and my seat was towards the back of the plane, and there weren't a lot of people on the flight, and just the window that was sort of right behind me, all of a sudden this beautiful glow started coming and filling the whole plane. Like it like shot through the whole plane, and I turned around and the sun had just peeked over the horizon, and it was so gorgeous. I snapped a picture of it, and we'll share it with everyone. But and just, I think in that moment, I'm looking around the plane and the other people that are in the plane, and there was no one else getting their phone out to take a picture of this beauty. There was no one else really. People didn't seem to like it. I felt like there was no notice of it. There was no marking of it. And I think that part of it is, I've always sort of tried to find myself paying attention to that kind of beauty, to the point that I love when my adult kids now will text me pictures of and say, look how beautiful this is. Look how, and so I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been doing that with them their whole lives, and now they're doing it.
Hmm.
But it's this work that we're doing that um, I just think paying attention to it makes such a difference,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
sharing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those, yeah,
Totally.
yeah,
Totally.
yeah.
It's really beautiful. And I mean, I couldn't think of a better thought on which to bring our
Mm,
episode in our series
yep.
to a close.
What a great series.
Yeah.
What a great series. Thank
Yeah.
you, Kurt. Thanks
Thank you.
for
Thanks,
thanks
Pep.
for bringing it. Appreciate you.
Yeah. Right on.
And we
You.
will be announcing season 9 soon.
Right
We're
on.
excited about it, and we'll be announcing that to you all soon. So pay attention for that. Okay.
Right. Very
Love you.
good.
Those of you who
Love you.
are on YouTube, will be joining Amy here in just a minute.
Amy Chella.
Oh my gosh, I cannot believe that season 8 is a wrap.
I
Crazy.
know. I know.
It's so fast.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Okay, two things stood out to me. And we've talked about the 2 tracks. Is it 2 tracks or 2 trains? It's 2 tracks.
2 tracks, and on which each runs a train. So you can have 2 trains, one for each
And
track.
and the even having a greater understanding of these tracks and
Mm-hmm.
trains is so helpful because it shows us what's happening, right? It puts words to what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I've often used the word hijacked. I've said it to you guys before that
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
I'll get hijacked,
Mm-hmm.
and and now, um, even that word when I think, "Ooh, I'm feeling hijacked," I think, okay, you are on track 1, and that is so helpful. And then curiosity. If I could just say, be curious, just in this moment, be curious.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It is That's almost enough
Mm-hmm.
to get me to track
Mm-hmm.
2, almost
Mm-hmm.
always.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that struck me, Pep, was when you told the story about the guy that just
Mm-hmm.
totally
Yeah.
went blank.
Yeah.
And I want to come back to that. And Kurt, when you talked about scuba diving, and then you had to go up 12 inches, it was like, but like that she was caring for you, like you
Yeah.
felt cared for by her.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I saw this clip of a Taylor Swift article concert, and her earpiece went out. And I don't know enough about music to know fully what that does to you. But I think because it was so loud in the concert, and you could see her in the video be like, she's telling them it doesn't work. And she goes over to her guitar player, and you can see her. She's just watching him play. And they said she's watching to see what chord and what keys he's playing. And you could see it register to her. And then she was off and running. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But the beauty in that is that he had her back. Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and then one more story, and then I want to get back to the guy that forgot his lines. But Pep and I were doing an event, and I said, and I was a little bit anxious, and I said, Pep, should I be nervous? And he said, without skipping a beat, we're doing this together. And that was it. Like, yeah, I still don't know if I was supposed to be nervous. I wasn't nervous anymore. It was like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
we're doing this
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
And those are all the same, the stories telling the same thing, right? That each of those stories, somebody else brings us to track 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Pep, I'm super curious if you were ever saved on stage.
Oh, yes. Yes. I would say that my first memory of it was the very first full equity production that I did after I got into the union. I was doing the play Bus Stop, and I remember like being on stage and just like like literally going. I don't know what my next line is. I don't know, and it feels like I said before, feels like an eternity, and the room's kind of getting this weird dimension to it, and you're like, um, and one of the actors just kind of prompted me with where I was going. It was an instance where he could say the line, and then boom, I was back. And really quick, there was one time where I was doing something for in church, and there wasn't much expectation when I did. There were 3 services on that Sunday. There wasn't much expectation.
You don't have to be quick, by the way. I want to hear it.
By the pastor for what was going to be happening, and I was on stage, and I don't even remember what the subject was, but we had all these people behind me in tableau, in these different tableaus as I was telling these stories or whatever. And so I did it the first time. And the next time, or then I got finished, and the pastor's like, "Oh my gosh, that was incredible." So the next time he gets up there and he like gives it this flowery introduction, like this is going to be the greatest thing you've ever seen. And we start, and I start, and I'm kind of feeling, I'm feeling pretty good about myself, I'm like, yeah. And I go to open my mouth, and there's just white space. There's just not, and I don't know where I am.
Unbelievable.
And my mind is thinking, okay, my script is in the front pew. I'll go get it, because I can't, this is how you feel like it's just this eternity that's happening. And literally my thought was, wait a minute, this isn't about you. Just breathe. And it all just came back, right? Like that.
Oh my gosh.
It's anxiety provoking for sure. And it's about finding ways back into the present. And yeah.
That's beautiful.
Well, you guys, this was a great day, great season.
It's beautiful.
It was.
Amy, we just want to acknowledge again that you're still in recovery mode. It's been, the COVID really banged you around a bit, and so just it's hard when you're getting hit by that illness and you still have still coming out of that. So we're really grateful that you're here. So thanks so much for joining us again on the last legs of that, getting through that. And so it's been a great season, guys, and looking forward to the next one.
Looking forward to the next season. Okay.
Alrighty.
Bye, everybody.
Till then. Love you.
Bye, guys. Love you too.
This podcast is produced by Kurt Thompson, Pepper Sweeney, and myself, Amy Chella. Audio production and editing is by Keaton Simons. Video production and editing is done by Mark Gould. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on social media at BeingKnownPod. If you like this podcast, tell a friend. If you love this podcast, tell everyone you know. And please like, rate, and review wherever you listen. Be well, be now.